But how about what UConn is doing? So here is UConn basketball. 6th national title, back-to-back years. Here are the margins of victory. This is crazy. There wasn't like even a team that hit a 3 at the end of the buzzer to make it a 9-point game. Every single game. That doesn't mean there weren't some tests in there. They have beaten people to a pulp. The closest score was Miami a year ago, a 13-point win in the semifinals.
You know, and Purdue, you know what's weird about that game? If I'm Purdue, I go into half feeling good, only
36-30, yeah.
Down 6. But then if I'm UConn, I feel good knowing that we're only 2 scores away from double digits, which is what our whole thing is. And boom, boom, they got it before, I think before I even turned around. I went from my mom's house to our house, which is 5 minutes away, right at the end of halftime, and I turned it on, and I heard a couple balls bounce as I was putting something in the fridge, and then it was 40-30 right then.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, that's it. And then I think as the minutes wore on, even on the possessions where UConn wasn't scoring, you could see Purdue feeling like, oh, no, they have us where they want us right now. And there was just a struggle from then on because there was no one who hits the pedal harder than UConn when they have a lead. I think it's a little bit, even though they blew out teams way worse throughout, but the 2021 Baylor run, if you got to, at any point during that season, if they got to an 8-point lead on you, it was over because you were not going to get 3 possessions in a row where you were going to score.
Because that defense was so
good.
Locked down.
And UConn was so good in every aspect that you're just not going to get, once they got to double digits, 4 or 5 possessions in a row, and they only let Purdue shoot 7 threes last night. I mean, 1 of 7 from 3, you're not going to beat UConn making a 3.
Yeah.
You're going to have to make a lot of them, and I know that
their
game runs through
Alabama,
80, but still.
They're going to have to hit 15 or 17 to have a chance, and they tried to. But so Craig, we're going to get to how many national titles in a minute, but they have beaten the hell out of people now, even with the loss to Creighton and Kansas, and I believe there was another loss in there somewhere else. They have just manhandled people this year.
Respectfully, who cares about the losses? I mean, I know what your point is about them manhandling people, but they had a couple of down, results, but for the most part, I don't think those are going to be really remembered that far into the future. All people are going to remember is, yes, this tremendous run that they're on, the back-to-back national titles, trying to make it 3. I'm sure we'll hear a lot of chatter about that over the next year when the times come, and already seen a little bit of that on Twitter about them trying to run it back again. But just an awfully impressive job. It wasn't the most exciting game in the world, but it did always feel like UConn was pretty in control of that game. I mean, I know it was tight at halftime, and, the second half, it kind of ebbed and flowed as far as remaining close enough that it wasn't a game over situation, but there with a few minutes left, I mean, they clearly separated themselves far enough to go, okay, this one's over now. This is kind of how we expected it to go. They're so long and athletic and explosive and
physical too,
big, and and Zach Edey's the biggest dude on the court. But then every other matchup, I think UConn might have had they just had the prototype, typical kind of height, at every position to have an advantage, except for against Edey. Even then, they had a 7-footer though.
They did. They had a 7-footer, and they had guys going down to just annoy the hell out of him, like mosquitoes in the summertime down below his waist.
Yeah, I mean they're a really good squad and really well coached, and it's just a great way to end what was a tremendous run, and they're flirting with a lot of stuff when it comes to the history books as well, and people are trying to portray them as the best since this or the best since that. However that all shakes out in people's minds, I think we're definitely all realizing we're seeing something pretty great right now in Storrs, Connecticut with Dan Hurley and that basketball program. So, yeah, hats off to the Huskies, and great finish to a very fun and entertaining season. I do feel like there's a lot left to be desired, especially in comparison to the women's game, which I never thought I would say that, but it did feel like that one had a lot more juice to it, and I'm sure that the tip-off time had something to do with that, because as much as we talked about that for a second yesterday, and I said, yeah, that's just what it is every year, which is true. Man, that really is a long time to wait for a basketball game to tip off, man. That really was. I was 9 o'clock, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to go check in on this. Oh, wait, I still have 20 minutes of pregame left to go. So that was just a weird yearly reminder of why that just is an idea that not a lot of people are on board with. But I think that affected some of the juice probably as well, even though it was local time just fine there in Phoenix. But yeah, not the greatest ending to a season, but it was fine, and UConn was pretty much from start to finish the best team. So I think the best team was standing tall at the end of things.
Here now are a list of the national championships, and it's interesting because UCLA hasn't won one in a long, long time. They made a run. They were the one that took Gonzaga, remember, to the wire and then overtime in 2021. They've had a great history. That's the 6th national title, all of them since 1999. UCLA, 11. Wooden with Wooden won like 8 or 9 of those. Kentucky with 8, but it's been a while for them too. North Carolina with 6, and that's where UConn is. And this is one of those that wasn't like doing things back in the 30s and 40s to add 1 or 2 there. This has been, over the last quarter of a century, 6 national titles. Is it comparable to who in football?
Bama.
No,
Bama's a mix of Kentucky and UConn.
Yeah, there you go.
Because
That's
Bama
great.
for a while was what Kentucky is, except for they didn't even have like the 98 and the 20. Like they had their stretch where they were, and then they came back with a ferocity where they've reeled off all these modern, these recent ones. So yeah, I think they're kind of a mix of both Kentucky and UConn. So maybe. I mean, it's hard to say because they've won 6 in such a short amount. Nobody's done that.
In the 80s, 90s, and Miami kind of came out of nowhere. Florida State just couldn't quite get to that. But
Georgia sort of has that potential. Like Clemson was on their way to kind of be. But I think in football, though, it's just so much harder.
I'm talking about a non-alpha blue blood type name that all of a sudden is just Clemson. Running. Clemson's probably it because they had the one in 81 or 80, and then there was a long time there. And same thing with Georgia with what they've done. All right, so there we are with the national championship numbers, and my goodness, they're making a run at that. A couple of other college basketball notes.